guys! So today is my birthday and I thought what a better day to share with you guys my least favorite, most hated books of 2016 than on my birthday. A time of, you know, celebrating me and my unpopular opinions. So I only have 4 books to talk about, and all of these books I rated 1 star, and that might have even been a little bit generous. The first one that I'm going to talk about is The Wrath in the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh. I have a full non-spoiler review about this book, so I'm not going to talk too long about it, but I just hated this book. I hated the main character and her motivations. This book is a retelling of 1001 Nights, and basically it is about a king who every day he marries a new woman, and by the next morning his bride has been killed, and the main character's best friend was one of his victims. She was killed by the king, and so the main character agrees to marry him so that she can get revenge for her best friend, and in the process she ends up falling in love with him. And it really annoyed me because in the same breath she would say, oh, I want to kill him, I want to get vengeance for my best friend, and then she would be like swooning and her heart would be melting and she'd be kissing him and falling in love, and I hated it. I also didn't like the writing. I just wasn't a fan of this book at all. I was very disappointed by it, and if you want to know more in detailed thoughts, you can go watch my review. The next book that I absolutely hated was actually the first one that I read of 2016, and it's still, even a year later, it makes my blood boil thinking about this book, and that is November 9 by Colleen Hoover. Now I'm gonna leave a link to a review that Whitney over at Witty Novels wrote because it was the most perfect review. She gave so many examples and passages from the book that just show how incredibly wrong this romance is. I don't recommend anyone reading this. I think it's disgusting. I think it's so sexist, and the thing that I have a problem with Colleen Hoover is that she writes these romances that are so abusive, but her books aren't about an abusive relationship. It's not talking about the consequences of abusive relationships. It's a romance book that you're supposed to ship and you're supposed to want these two characters to be together, but all of her books are just such abusive relationships, and it's just deplorable in my mind. I think that she needs to be held accountable for this, and I just don't recommend her books. This one was definitely the one that infuriated me the most, and I think you should definitely go read Whitney's review because it was spot on, perfect, and I couldn't say anything better than what was in her review. The next book is Captive Prince by C.S. Pacat. Okay. So, I was extremely excited to read this book. It was one of the only fantasy male romances that I had ever heard of. I was so excited to see the type of representation in a fantasy book. I heard that the world was very homonormative and that like everybody in the book is gay, and I thought I was just like, yes, give it to me. But I hated this book. Oh God, I hated it so much. There was so much rape and abuse and torture, and just that alone wasn't why I hated it. I can handle rape, I can handle abuse, but my problem with this book was the relationship between the two main characters, Damon and Laurent. Even though this first book has no romance in it between the two main characters, going into the book, I knew that that's where the series would go. I knew that books 2 and 3 is them developing a romantic relationship. And so this entire book, I was reading it and it left such a bad taste in my mouth knowing that these two characters end up falling in love. And I mean, one scene in particular just made me want to burn this book. I was so mad, and I mean, if you don't want to be spoiled, skip this part, but it was when Laurent forced another slave to perform oral sex on Damon, who did not want this to happen. And to me, that is rape. Whether you're being forced to perform or forced to receive oral sex, it's rape. Like, that is rape. And I just couldn't get behind a relationship where the foundation was built on one character forcing the other to receive oral sex in front of a whole crowd of people. I know people keep telling me to read the second and the third books, but this book just made me so mad. I won't do it. I can't, I won't, I refuse. Sorry. And the last book that I hated in 2016 is Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. Ugh, this book was horrible. Okay, so I did not have high hopes going into Harry Potter and the Cursed Child because, well, first of all, I didn't want to be let down. I didn't want to get my hopes up, and also because I knew that J.K. Rowling didn't write it. I feel like this is a controversial statement. A lot of people like to argue me with it. Yes, J.K. Rowling came up with the concept. She came up with the idea of the story, but she did not write the play. Bottom line, she didn't write the play. The words that we were reading were not her words. She signed off on them, sure. It was her original idea, yes, but she didn't write it, okay? Now that that's passed, I felt like a lot of the characters were acting out of character, specifically the trio, Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Ron was basically just like a joke. He was like in the background telling stupid dad jokes, being the punchline. I really feel like Ron in this play took up the place of Fred and George. He was supposed to be, you know, Fred and George were always the comedic relief in the series, and I feel like in the play he was just kind of, he was that placeholder of comedic relief, and I just didn't like it. Hermione, I didn't love. Harry, I hated. I hated him. I really hated him. I thought he was a horrible father. Besides all that, besides the, you know, characters not seeming like themselves, besides the stupid time travel plot that made no sense based on the rules already established about time travel in this world, the thing that pissed me off the most was the blatant queer baiting between the characters of Albus and Scorpius. J.K. Rowling already does not have a good reputation in my mind when it comes to LGBT representation in Harry Potter. The only representation we got in the original series was Dumbledore, and his sexuality was an afterthought. It was something that she told us after the series had been done. Some people say there's evidence in the text. I don't think so. I mean, if nobody figured out that he is gay until the whole series was out and she had to literally be like, he's gay, I don't think there's really evidence in the text. And so with that, and then now the queer baiting between Albus and Scorpius, it kind of ruined some of the magic behind Harry Potter for me. I really wish I didn't read Cursed Child, so I hated it. End of story. Those were all the books that I hated in 2016. I feel like the books that I didn't like in 2016 were my most hated books of all time, but then on the flip side of that, my favorite books of 2016 are probably my favorite books of all time. So it was overall a really good reading year. I just had very strong feelings about all the books that I read, which is what I love about reading. I love hating books, I love loving books. So it was a very good reading year for me. If you want to know what my favorite books of 2016 were, I will link the video somewhere up there and you can go watch it. Let me know what your least favorite book of 2016 was. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!